The night started like any other friendly dinner in Accra. We sat around a small table, laughing, sharing food, talking about work and life. I was sitting next to my husband, Cojo Mensah, feeling safe in that quiet way married people do. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing warned me. Then Cojo's phone buzzed. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and suddenly laughed. Not a soft laugh. Not an awkward one. A full, happy laugh that cut through the room. Everyone looked at him. He didn't even notice us staring. He looked at his phone again and said, still smiling, "I just found the love of my life." The room froze. First I smiled too. I honestly thought it was a joke. I waited for him to say my name. I waited for him to laugh and say, "Relax, it's Amma." But he didn't. He just kept smiling at his phone like the rest of us had disappeared. I whispered, "Cojo, what do you mean?" He laughed again. That laugh. Casual. Careless. Like nothing important had just been said. Our friends suddenly found the table very interesting. Someone cleared their throat. Someone checked the time. No one spoke. My heart started racing. I searched his face for embarrassment, for regret, for anything that said this was a mistake. There was nothing. Joy. Not for me. Not for us. For someone else. In that moment, I understood something without anyone explaining it. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't teasing. This was the truth slipping out because he forgot to hide it. Cojo's laugh kept echoing in my head, long after the dinner ended. That laugh didn't just break the silence in the room. It broke my marriage. And he didn't even notice. After Cojo laughed, someone finally asked him, half joking, half nervous, "Wait, what do you mean by that?" Cojo didn't look at me. He leaned back in his chair like this was a normal conversation. Like he was explaining the weather. He said very calmly, "I mean, she understands me more than you do." That was it. No apology. No pause. No lowering of his voice. Just one sentence, spoken in front of our friends, that erased years of marriage. The table went quiet again, but this time it felt heavier. You could hear the fan on the ceiling. You could hear cutlery being put down slowly. Everyone suddenly became uncomfortable, like they had walked into something private that was never meant to be public. I felt the tears rush to my eyes instantly. They came so fast it scared me. But I didn't cry out loud. I didn't shout. I didn't ask questions. My body froze, but my heart felt like it was falling down a long staircase with no end. I looked at Cojo, waiting for him to notice me breaking. He didn't. He was still relaxed, still sure of himself. He even smiled a little, like he had just said something honest and brave. "She listens," he continued, still casual. "She gets my dreams. With you, everything feels quiet." Quiet. That word hit harder than an insult. Quiet meant boring. Quiet meant invisible. Quiet meant replaceable. One of our friends tried to laugh it off and said, "Cojo, you're not serious, right?" But Cojo didn't laugh. He shrugged. "I'm just saying the truth. The truth." I wanted to disappear into my chair. I could feel every eye on me, not judging but pitying, and somehow that felt worse. I blinked fast, trying to keep the tears from falling. I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. In that moment, something important died inside me. It wasn't love. It wasn't even trust. It was respect. Respect is fragile. It doesn't need shouting to break it. Sometimes all it takes is one calm sentence, spoken at the wrong time, in front of the wrong people. Cojo finally looked at me then, as if he remembered I was there. "Amma, don't take it like that," he said. "You know how I am." I nodded slowly, even though I didn't understand anything anymore. My hands were shaking under the table. My throat burned from holding back words I was too tired to say. That dinner ended soon after. People made excuses. Plates were left half full. Chairs scraped the floor. Hugs were awkward and quick. On the way home, Cojo talked about traffic. I stared out the window, watching the lights of Accra blur together, and realized something painful and clear. He hadn't humiliated me by accident. He had humiliated me because he no longer cared who saw it. That night, sleep refused to come. Cojo was already asleep beside me, breathing slowly, peacefully, like he hadn't shattered my world just hours earlier. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying his words again and again. She understands me more than you. The sentence kept looping in my head until my chest started to hurt. I didn't plan to check his phone. I told myself I wouldn't. But around 2 a.m., when the room felt too quiet and my thoughts too loud, his phone lit up on the bedside table. A message preview flashed on the screen. Heart emoji. A name I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. The phone unlocked easily. Of course it did. He had nothing to hide anymore. The first thing I saw was photos. Not secret photos taken in the dark, but confident ones. Smiling selfies. Her head on his shoulder. His hand around her waist. Photos taken in daylight in places I knew. Places we used to go together. In one picture, she was wearing the shirt I bought him for his birthday. My stomach turned. Then I listened to the voice notes. Her voice was soft and playful. "I miss you already," she said in one. In another, she laughed and said, "Soon we won't have to hide." Cojo's voice followed hers. Warm and excited in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. "Just be patient," he said. "I'm figuring things out." Figuring things out. I scrolled further, hoping stupidly that I would find guilt, regret. A line where he said he was confused. There was none. Instead, there were plans. Messages about trips they wanted to take, apartments they liked. Jokes about how quiet life would be once everything changed. In one message, she asked, "What about Amma?" And Cojo replied, "She'll be fine. She's strong." I felt something crack inside me at that moment. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't just an affair. I wasn't being cheated on. I was being replaced. She knew about me. He talked about me. And still, she smiled in those photos like she had already won. Like my place in his life was already empty. I put the phone down slowly and lay back on the bed. My eyes were burning, but no tears came. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left only the shell. Cojo turned in his sleep and reached for me out of habit. His hand rested on my arm. I didn't move. In the dark, next to a man who was planning a future without me, I understood the truth. He had already left. His body was still beside mine, but his heart was living somewhere else, with a woman behind a screen who was slowly stepping into my life and erasing me. And the worst part wasn't that he loved her. The worst part was that he had already imagined a world where I no longer existed. After that night, Cojo stopped pretending. He started coming home late, and when he did, he never explained. At first, I asked softly, "Are you okay?" Then I asked less. Eventually, I stopped asking at all. His answers were always short, cold, like I was bothering him just by caring. He no longer looked at me the way he used to. His eyes would pass over me like I was furniture. When I spoke, he sighed. When I stayed quiet, he got annoyed. There was no right way to exist around him anymore. One evening, I asked if we could eat together like before. He didn't even look up from his phone. "I'm not hungry," he said. 10 minutes later, he walked out, keys in hand. When I asked where he was going, he replied, "Out. Don't wait up." The house started to feel smaller, heavier. Silence filled every corner, but it wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind that presses on your chest. I tried to fix things in small ways. Cooked his favorite meals. I laughed at his jokes. I asked about his day. Nothing reached him. Instead, he started blaming me. One night, out of nowhere, he said, "You're always so quiet." I nodded, unsure what he wanted me to say. He added, "It's boring. You're boring." The word stung more than I expected. I wanted to remind him that I used to laugh, that I used to tell stories, that I used to feel safe enough to be loud. But I stayed silent because every time I spoke, it somehow became my fault. "You never understand me," he said another day. "You don't excite me. You don't challenge me." Each sentence felt like he was slowly erasing pieces of me, then blaming me for disappearing. I started questioning myself. Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I had become boring. Maybe love really did leave when a woman stopped entertaining a man. I caught my reflection in the mirror one morning and barely recognized myself. My shoulders were always tense. My smile looked forced. My eyes looked tired, like they had been crying for weeks without tears. I felt myself shrinking to survive. I spoke less. I laughed less. I existed carefully, like walking on broken glass in my own home. And Cojo seemed relieved by it. The colder he became, the more I tried to disappear. The more I disappeared, the more he blamed me for being invisible. One evening, after another late return, he looked at me and said, "You've changed." I almost laughed. Yes, I had changed. But not because I wanted to. I had changed because loving him had slowly taught me how to make myself smaller. Lying in bed that night, staring at the wall, I finally understood something painful. He wasn't falling. That morning felt strangely calm. The sun came in through the window like any other day. Birds made noise outside. The world didn't know my marriage was ending, and it didn't pause for it. I woke up early and found Cojo already standing in the bedroom, pulling clothes from the closet and dropping them into a suitcase. For a moment I just watched him. I didn't ask what he was doing. Already knew. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet room. Each pull felt final, like a door closing over and over again. He packed carefully, not in a rush, not angry. He looked focused, certain. I finally said his name, softly. "Cojo." He didn't stop. He folded a shirt and placed it neatly in the bag. Then he looked at me and said very calmly, "I deserve happiness." That sentence sat between us like a wall. I waited for more. For an explanation. For regret. For even a small crack in his voice. There was none. He wasn't leaving in pain. He was leaving with relief. I wanted to ask, what about me? What about us? But the words stayed stuck in my throat. Something inside me was too tired to beg. So I said nothing. Cojo zipped the bag shut and stood up. He smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not an angry one. A light smile. Like someone stepping into a better life. He walked around the room, picking up small things. His watch. His charger. His shoes by the door. He moved like he had practiced this moment many times in his head. The door, he paused. "You'll be okay," he said without turning around. "You always are." I nodded, even though my chest felt like it was breaking open. Then he opened the door and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. No slam. No drama. Just a quiet sound that echoed through the whole house. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door. I expected to feel something big. Anger. Screaming. Tears. Instead, there was a deep, heavy silence inside me. I slowly walked through the house. His side of the bed was empty. His shoes were gone. The bathroom felt larger, colder, like he had taken the warmth with him. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself breathe. My hands were shaking. My heart was aching, but I was still standing. What hurt the most wasn't that he left. It was that he left smiling. He walked away believing happiness was somewhere else, with someone else, and that leaving me was the price he was willing to pay. And I stood there, in the quiet of our broken home, realizing that the man who once promised to protect my heart had chosen to protect only his own. The door stayed closed. But something inside me, quietly, began to wake up. I left Accra a week after Cojo walked out. I didn't tell many people where I was going. I just packed a small bag and took a bus to Cape Coast, a place where no one knew my story and no one expected anything from me. The sea was loud there. Helped drown my thoughts. I found a small room behind an old house and took a simple job at a quiet office near the market. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but it paid enough to survive. Every morning I woke up, dressed neatly and showed up, even when my chest felt heavy, even when my eyes burned from crying the night before. People ask questions. They always do. Where is your husband? Did you move for work? Why are you alone? I learned to smile before they finished speaking. Polite smile. Safe smile. The kind that ends conversations without inviting more. "He's busy," I would say. Or, "Life happens." Most people nodded and moved on. They were satisfied with half-truths. Inside I was anything but fine. There were days when I stood at the bus stop and felt completely invisible. Couples passed by, laughing, holding hands. Families argued over small things. Normal life went on and I felt like I was watching it through glass. At work I focused on small tasks. Filing papers. Answering emails. Making tea. Simple routines became my anchor. Pain didn't disappear, but it learned to sit quietly beside me. At night, when the room was too silent, the memories came back. Kojo's laugh, his smile when he left, his voice saying, "I deserve happiness." I would sit on the bed and let the tears fall without making a sound. Crying became something private, something controlled. I was ashamed even though I didn't know why. Ashamed that my marriage failed. Ashamed that people might think I wasn't enough. Ashamed that I still missed someone who chose to walk away. So I carried my pain neatly, like a secret no one was allowed to touch. Slowly, survival became routine. Wake up, work, mail, come home, cook for one, leave. Some days were harder than others. Some mornings I had to sit on the edge of the bed and remind myself to breathe. But I kept going, not because I was strong but because stopping felt worse. One evening, I stood by the sea and watched the waves crash again and again. They didn't ask permission. They didn't apologize for being loud. They just came, retreated, and came back stronger. That's when I understood something important. I didn't need to explain my pain to survive it. I didn't need to answer every question. I didn't need to prove my worth to anyone. In Cape Coast, in silence and routine, I learned how to live with my broken heart without letting it break me completely. I smiled for the world, and quietly I survived. There was something Cojo never knew about me. Even during our marriage, when I looked quiet and ordinary to him, I was building something of my own. It started small, almost invisible. Late nights with my laptop open, soft music playing, working while he slept. I never talked about it much. Not because it was a secret I planned, but because every time I shared my ideas, he brushed them off. "Just rest," he would say. "Not everything has to be work." So I worked in silence. I began with digital exports. Simple services at first. Files, designs, coordination work for people outside Ghana. I didn't even think of it as a business back then. It was just something that made me feel capable. Something that reminded me I was more than a wife waiting to be noticed. Slowly, foreign clients started coming in. One from the UK. Then one from Canada. Then someone from Germany who liked how organized I was. They didn't know me as Kojo's wife. They knew me as Alma. Reliable. Professional. Each email that said, "We'd like to continue working with you," healed a small part of me. During the marriage, I kept the success quiet. I paid for small things without explaining how. When money came in, I saved it. Not because I was planning to leave, but because somewhere deep inside, I needed to know I could survive if everything fell apart. Cojo never asked. He never noticed. To him, I was just quiet Alma. The boring one. The woman who didn't excite him. After he left and I moved to Cape Coast, that side hustle became my lifeline. I set up a small desk in my room. Second-hand chair. Table by the window. The sea air kept me awake at night while I worked. I expanded carefully. Took bigger projects. Learned new tools. Met deadlines. My clients trusted me, and that trust felt like oxygen. The money grew slowly, then steadily. Not overnight wealth. Not dramatic success. Just enough to breathe without fear. Some nights, I laughed quietly to myself. The woman he said didn't understand him was negotiating contracts in another time zone. The woman he said was boring was building a future in silence. Cojo never knew because he never looked closely enough. He thought my quiet meant emptiness. He thought my silence meant I had nothing to say. But silence was where I did my strongest work. As the months passed, I realized something powerful. He didn't leave a helpless woman behind. He left a woman who had already learned how to stand on her own, even while loving him. And while he was chasing happiness loudly, I was creating stability quietly. That secret didn't need to be revealed to him, because it wasn't built to impress anyone. It was built to save me. I didn't hear about Kojo's fall all at once. Came in pieces like gossip usually does. A message from an old friend. A voice note from someone who felt awkward sharing the news but couldn't resist. Each detail landed quietly, but together they formed a picture I never imagined so clearly. The woman he left me for wasn't who she said she was. The big plans, the confidence, the promises of connections and opportunities. All of it was fake. She had borrowed money in his name, used his trust like a tool, sign things he didn't fully read. By the time Cojo realized what was happening, it was already too late. His job went first. A temporary issue, he told people. Then a misunderstanding. Then silence. The same silence he once gave me. Bills started piling up. Debts he never talked about became public problems. People who used to greet him warmly now avoided eye contact. The man who once walked out smiling was suddenly explaining himself to everyone. And the woman, she disappeared. No goodbye. No apology. Just gone. Phone numbers disconnected. Social media wiped clean. The love of his life vanished the moment life became heavy. What hurt him most wasn't even the money. It was the embarrassment. The same friends who sat frozen at that dinner table now whispered his name in corners. The same people who watched him humiliate me now watched him struggle. Some tried to help. Others watched quietly. Few laughed. Life has a strange way of circling back. I saw him once from a distance months later. He looked thinner, older. His confidence had cracks in it. The way he walked was different, like someone carrying invisible weight. For a moment, I felt something rise in my chest. Not joy, not revenge. Just a deep, quiet sadness. This was the man who said I was boring. This was the man who said I didn't understand him. This was the man who walked away believing happiness was easy, loud, and immediate. Now, happiness had slipped through his fingers, and everyone could see it. People asked me how I felt when I heard. I surprised myself with my answer. I feel nothing, and it was true. By the time his world collapsed, mine had already rebuilt its foundation. I had cried my tears in private rooms. I had survived my shame quietly. I had learned how to live without applause. Cojo's collapse was loud. Mine had been silent, and that made all the difference. The people who once laughed with him now laughed at him. But I didn't join them, because the greatest lesson I learned wasn't how to celebrate someone else's fall. It was how to walk away from the ruins of my own life and never look back. The call came on a quiet evening. I was sitting by the window in Cape Coast, my laptop open, the sound of the sea moving softly in the background. My phone buzzed on the table. I almost ignored it. Unknown number. I let it ring once. Something told me to answer. Hello, said. There was silence on the other end. Then a breath, heavy, uneven. I knew that breath before he spoke. Amma, it's me. Cojo's voice sounded smaller than I remembered, broken in places, like someone speaking through regret instead of confidence. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to say his name. He already knew I was listening. I made a mistake, he said finally. The words fell out fast, like he had been holding them in for too long. I messed everything up. I should have never left. I didn't know how good I had it. I closed my eyes and listened. He talked about stress, about pressure, about how things went wrong so quickly, about how he felt lost. He spoke like he was explaining himself to a judge, hoping for mercy. I let him speak. Silence, I had learned, makes people reveal more than questions ever do. I think about you all the time, he said. You were always there. You never embarrassed me. You never failed me. That last part almost made me laugh. He paused, waiting for me to say something, to comfort him, to correct him, to offer him a way back. I didn't. The quiet stretched between us. I could hear his breathing again, nervous, uncertain, the same uncertainty I once carried alone. Finally I spoke. My voice surprised even me. It was calm, steady. Why are you calling me, Cojo? Another pause. Then softly. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I hear you, I said. That was all. He waited again. I knew he was hoping for more. Forgiveness, warmth, a second chance hidden between my words. But I had already given him all the words I could afford. After a moment he said, Amma, do you think we could talk again sometime? I looked out at the dark water beyond my window. The waves didn't rush. They didn't beg. They just moved forward. I think this is enough, I replied gently. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything I had already survived. full of the woman I had become after he left, full of peace that didn't need his understanding. He whispered my name once more like a question. I didn't answer. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel proud or cruel. It felt finished. That night I learned something powerful. Closure doesn't always come from long conversations. Sometimes it comes from finally being able to listen and choose silence. The divorce was finalized on a quiet morning. No tears. No shaking hands. Just my signature on paper that officially closed a chapter of my life. When I walked out of that office, the air felt lighter. Not because the past didn't matter, but because it no longer owned me. I moved into a small home not far from the sea. It wasn't big. It wasn't fancy. But every corner of it belonged to me. Chose the curtains. I chose the color of the walls. Chose the silence. For the first time in a long time, my life felt like it fit me. People noticed the change before I did. They said I looked calmer, taller, like someone who had stopped apologizing for existing. I laughed more. Not loud laughter meant to impress anyone, but quiet, real laughter that came from peace. I wasn't angry at Cojo anymore. Anger takes energy, and I had better places to spend mine. I wasn't waiting for him to regret more. I wasn't hoping for explanations. I had already answered the questions that mattered. Who am I without him? Can I survive alone? Was I ever enough? The answers were clear now. I built a routine that felt like mine. Work I was proud of. Evenings by the water. Mornings that didn't start with fear. I learned that healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself again and again, quietly. One evening, as the sun dropped into the ocean, I realized something that made me smile. Cojo laughed because he thought love was something you replace. I stayed silent because I knew love was something you survive. He went searching for excitement and lost himself in the noise. I walked through pain and found my strength in the quiet. He found the love of his life, and I found my own.